On a sweltering Miami afternoon, the air thick with humidity and anticipation, former President Donald Trump emerged from the federal courthouse, his face a mask of composure despite the gravity of the situation. He had just pleaded not guilty to 37 federal charges, including violations of the Espionage Act, a legal storm unlike any he had weathered before. As Trump descended the courthouse steps, a sea of cameras, reporters, and flashing lights engulfed him. The cacophony of shouted questions, cheers from supporters, and jeers from detractors created a deafening wall of sound. His team formed a protective barrier, guiding him swiftly towards the waiting motorcade. With a brief wave to the crowd, Trump ducked into a black SUV, the door slamming shut and sealing him off from the chaos outside. Inside the vehicle, tension hung heavy in the air. Trump's advisors exchanged uneasy glances, fully aware of the potential fallout from the charges. But Trump, ever the showman, was already plotting his next move. "We need to change the narrative," he declared, breaking the tense silence. Something to shift the focus. One of his aides, a sharp-eyed woman with a knack for public relations, suggested a stop at Versailles, Miami's famous Cuban restaurant. "It's a local institution," she explained. "You've got a lot of support in the Cuban-American community. A visit there could lift spirits and show you're still connected to the people." Trump considered the idea for a moment before nodding his approval. "Let's do it," he said, a hint of enthusiasm creeping into his voice. As the motorcade wound its way through Miami's bustling streets, word of Trump's impromptu visit spread like wildfire on social media. Within minutes, #TrumpAdversary was trending, and anticipation began to build. Supporters who had been glued to their screens watching the courthouse proceedings eagerly made their way to the restaurant, hoping for a chance to see their president up close. However, as the motorcade neared Versailles, a group of protesters had gathered outside, their numbers swelling as news of the visit spread. They held signs and chanted slogans, determined to make their voices heard. The usually lively atmosphere around the restaurant, typically filled with the aroma of Cuban coffee and animated conversations, was now charged with tension. But as Trump's SUV pulled up to the entrance, something unexpected happened. A small group of Cuban elders, regular patrons of Versailles, emerged from the crowd and began engaging the protesters in heated discussions. These elders, who had fled Castro's regime decades ago, held a deep-seated appreciation for Trump's tough stance on communism. Their passionate arguments drew attention away from the motorcade, creating an unexpected diversion. Trump's team, sensing the shift in focus, quickly ushered him inside the restaurant. The plan had been to make a brief appearance, but as soon as Trump walked through the door, he was greeted by a wave of cheers. The atmosphere inside was electric, a stark contrast to the tense scene outside. Supporters had packed the small space, some even climbing on chairs to get a better view. Trump smiled, raising a hand in acknowledgement as the crowd chanted his name. As Trump made his way to the bakery section, the restaurant's owner stepped forward. In a move that caught everyone off guard, the owner, the lifelong Democrat, handed Trump a traditional Cuban sandwich and a cafecito, saying, "No matter our differences, you're always welcome here." The gesture, simple yet powerful, was met with applause from the crowd and created a moment of unity that transcended politics. Trump's presence had turned Versailles into a frenzy of excitement. The narrow aisles were packed with supporters, their faces alight with anticipation. Chants of "Trump! Trump! Trump!" reverberated off the tiled walls, creating an almost palpable wave of enthusiasm. The former president soaked it all in, his smile widening as he moved through the throng of admirers. Every handshake, every nod seemed to elevate the mood even more. As Trump reached the bakery section, where rows of golden pastelitos and croquetas gleamed behind glass, the cheers intensified. Trump, sensing the moment, raised his hands for silence. The crowd gradually quieted, eager to hear what he would say. For a brief second, he let the anticipation hang in the air before loudly declaring, "Food for everyone." The response was immediate and explosive. The room erupted in applause and cheers, the promise igniting a fresh wave of jubilation. The announcement spread like wildfire through the restaurant, with people outside even pressing against the windows, hoping to catch a glimpse of the action. As the excitement reached its peak, a surprise twist unfolded. Alejandro, a young Cuban-American waiter, realized that the kitchen had not been informed about this impromptu gesture. Panicked, he quickly made his way through the crowd to the back, where the chef was unaware of the declaration and was preparing the usual orders. Breathless, Alejandro relayed the news. The chef, a seasoned veteran of the restaurant, looked around at his small team, realizing the monumental task ahead. Outside, the atmosphere at Versailles was thick with anticipation. Supporters, buoyed by Trump's bold declaration, eagerly lined up at the counter, their mouths watering at the thought of croquetas, pastelitos, and steaming cups of cafecitos. The jubilant atmosphere seemed unstoppable, with the promise of free food adding a festive touch to the already electric environment. As the minutes ticked by, however, a sense of unease began to creep in. The line of eager patrons grew longer, yet no plates of food were emerging from the kitchen. Staff members moved frantically behind the counter, their faces betraying growing confusion. Conversations among the crowd shifted from excited chatter to concerned murmurs. It soon became clear that something wasn't right. In the kitchen, the situation was becoming dire. The head chef, a grizzled veteran of Miami's culinary scene, had quickly realized that no one from Trump's team had made any arrangements to pay for the promised feast. As orders piled up and the crowd's impatience mounted, he knew the restaurant couldn't possibly cover the cost of feeding everyone. He exchanged a worried glance with the manager, who was equally troubled by the unfolding chaos. Meanwhile, out in the dining area, Trump remained blissfully unaware of the mounting tension. He moved through the throng of supporters, shaking hands, posing for selfies, and accepting early birthday wishes with his trademark grin. The cheers and adoration that surrounded him created a bubble, insulating him from the growing discontent among those still waiting for their promised meals. However, an older man, a regular at Versailles, approached the counter with a question that stopped the staff in their tracks. "Where's the food?" he asked bluntly, his voice cutting through the noise. His words seemed to trigger a ripple of realization among those waiting. The room, once filled with laughter and cheers, began to simmer with frustration as more people joined in asking the same question. The mood shifted, and the festive atmosphere was quickly replaced by uncertainty. Trump's team, sensing the change in the crowd, began to exchange uneasy glances. A few aides attempted to discreetly assess the situation, but the confusion in the kitchen was evident. One staffer whispered urgently into a colleague's ear, their faces growing more concerned as the reality of the situation became clear. There was no plan, no payment, and no food coming. A young woman holding her phone raised her voice above the murmuring crowd. "They're saying on Twitter that the food was a lie," she called out, her words hanging in the air like a dark cloud. The news spread quickly through the restaurant, with people checking their own devices, confirming that the initial excitement had already turned into a social media frenzy. Posts from disappointed supporters were rapidly gaining traction, and the hashtag #NoFoodForYou was trending. The disappointment among the crowd was palpable now, with the realization that Trump's promise was slipping through their fingers. Yet the former president, still basking in the adoration of his immediate supporters, continued his tour of the restaurant, seemingly oblivious to the growing tension just feet away. A middle-aged woman who had been standing quietly in the back decided to take matters into her own hands. She stepped forward and began handing out small bills to the nearest patrons, urging them to buy their own meals. "Let's show them we don't need handouts," she said, her voice firm and resolute. The gesture, though small, sparked a wave of solidarity among the crowd. People began pooling their money, ordering food for themselves and those around them, turning what could have been a complete debacle into a moment of shared resilience. As Trump's entourage finally signaled it was time to leave, the former president made his way towards the exit, still smiling, still waving. He never addressed the promise he had made, nor did he acknowledge the disappointment it had caused. Instead, he stepped out into the bright Miami sunlight, leaving behind a crowd that was a mixture of confused, disillusioned, and in some cases, strangely empowered. As Trump's motorcade disappeared down the sun-soaked streets of Miami, the once jubilant crowd inside Versailles began to dissipate. The earlier excitement had evaporated, leaving a mixture of confusion and quiet frustration in its wake. Those who had eagerly awaited their promised feast were now left to grapple with the reality that the food wasn't coming. The restaurant, once buzzing with energy, now echoed with murmurs of discontent as patrons began to share their disappointment. The first signs of unrest appeared on social media. A middle-aged man, still clutching his phone, typed furiously into Twitter. His post, accompanied by a photo of the bustling crowd inside the restaurant, read, "Trump promised food for everyone, but we didn't even get a croqueta. What happened? At Real Donald Trump." The tweet quickly gained traction, drawing comments from others who had been in the restaurant and those who had watched the spectacle unfold from afar. Within minutes, the hashtags #TrumpAdversary and #FoodForEveryone began trending. The conversation was a blend of admiration and criticism. Some supporters praised Trump's ability to draw a crowd, marveling at the sheer magnetism of his presence. Others, however, weren't as forgiving. The unfulfilled promise of free food became the focal point of the discussion, with many questioning how such a high-profile figure could leave without following through on his word. A well-known Miami influencer, who had been live-streaming the entire event, shared a scathing video critique. "He comes in, makes a grand promise, and then leaves without delivering. This isn't the first time we've seen this, folks," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. The video quickly went viral, racking up thousands of views in a matter of minutes. Her critique resonated with a broader audience beyond Trump's usual supporters, drawing in those who had grown weary of empty promises from politicians. As the conversation continued to explode online, a second twist added another layer to the narrative. A local news outlet, eager to capitalize on the trending topic, published an investigative piece that delved into Trump's history of grand gestures that never quite materialized. The article highlighted several instances from his past, including the infamous fast food banquet at the White House where he served college athletes a spread of burgers and fries during a government shutdown. The piece framed the Versailles incident as part of a larger pattern, fueling the growing criticism. The article was shared widely across social media platforms, with people from all sides of the political spectrum weighing in. Some defended Trump, arguing that the event at Versailles was meant to be a brief stop and not a full-fledged meal. Others, however, saw the unfulfilled promise as yet another example of the former president's tendency to prioritize spectacle over substance. The story was later picked up by national media outlets. What had begun as a small local event now became the subject of a broader debate about Trump's leadership style and the effectiveness of his public appearances. Cable news networks dedicated segments to the Versailles incident, with pundits and commentators dissecting every detail. Some framed the event as a harmless, if poorly executed, attempt to connect with supporters. Others saw it as a microcosm of Trump's larger political strategy that relied heavily on grand gestures without necessarily delivering on them. In the aftermath of the chaotic event, Versailles found itself in an unusual position. The restaurant, a cornerstone of Miami's Cuban-American community, had always been a place where politics, food, and culture intertwined. But now it was thrust into the national spotlight for reasons that had nothing to do with its storied past. The phones rang off the hook as reporters sought comments and customers voiced their opinions, some supportive, others angry. The first order of business for the restaurant's owners was damage control. They knew they had to address the situation quickly to preserve their reputation. After an emergency meeting with the management team, they issued a carefully worded statement. It expressed their honor in hosting a former president, but clarified that no arrangements had been made for the complimentary meal that Trump had promised. The statement was direct, aiming to distance the restaurant from any implication that they had misled patrons. Despite the clarity of the message, tension among the community was palpable. Many regular customers who had been swept up in the excitement now felt betrayed, not by Versailles, but by the unmet expectations that lingered in the air. In an effort to smooth things over, the restaurant announced that it would offer a small discount on selected items for the rest of the week. The idea was simple: acknowledge the disappointment without taking responsibility for the unfulfilled promise. A prominent local politician who frequently dined at Versailles took to social media to voice his support for the restaurant. In a series of tweets, he praised the owners for their quick response and emphasized the importance of supporting local businesses during challenging times. His words carried weight in the community, and many followers echoed his sentiments, sharing stories of their own positive experiences at the restaurant. This wave of goodwill provided a much-needed boost for Versailles, helping to counterbalance some of the negativity. However, a well-known food critic who had been quietly observing the unfolding drama published an op-ed in the Miami Herald. The piece was not just a review of Versailles food, but a critique of how the restaurant had handled the situation. The critic argued that while the discount was a nice gesture, it did little to address the deeper issue of community trust that had been shaken by the event. The op-ed quickly gained traction, sparking a debate about the responsibilities of beloved institutions like Versailles when caught in the crossfire of high-profile events. The restaurant's owners were well aware of the op-ed's impact. They understood that despite the support from some corners, there was a growing sentiment that more needed to be done to restore the community's faith. In response, they decided to take a more personal approach. The third twist came when the owners announced they would host a special Community Appreciation Day the following weekend. The event would feature live music, discounted meals, and a portion of the day's proceeds would be donated to a local charity that supported Cuban immigrants. This move was designed not only to attract patrons back to the restaurant, but also to re-establish Versailles as a cornerstone of the community. As the day of the event approached, there was a noticeable shift in the public's attitude. The promise of a gathering that celebrated the restaurant's role in Miami's cultural fabric began to overshadow the previous week's controversy. People who had felt let down were now looking forward to reconnecting with friends and neighbors over a meal at Versailles. The local media, which had been critical of the restaurant in the days following Trump's visit, started to cover the upcoming event in a more positive light, focusing on the charity aspect and the community's resilience. When Community Appreciation Day finally arrived, Versailles was once again packed, but this time the mood was different. There was a sense of unity and pride as patrons enjoyed the food, music, and company. The owners, visibly relieved, mingled with guests, shaking hands and sharing stories about the restaurant's history. The event was a success, not just in terms of attendance, but in the way it helped heal the rift that had formed in the aftermath of Trump's visit. By the end of the day, the atmosphere at Versailles had returned to something resembling normalcy. The restaurant had weathered the storm and emerged with its reputation intact, if not slightly bruised. The controversy that had erupted in the wake of Trump's unfulfilled promise was fading, replaced by a renewed sense of community and the knowledge that even in the face of unexpected challenges, Versailles remained a beloved Miami institution. As the dust settled on the Versailles incident, political analysts and media commentators began to examine the broader implications of what had transpired. Many saw the event as a microcosm of Trump's political style, bold, unpredictable, and often controversial. Some argued that the ability to generate such intense reactions, both positive and negative, was a key element of Trump's enduring appeal to his base. Supporters of the former president were quick to point out that despite the unfulfilled promise of free food, Trump's visit had energized the crowd and demonstrated his continued popularity among certain segments of the Latino community, particularly Cuban Americans. They argued that the enthusiasm on display at Versailles was indicative of a broader support base that mainstream media often overlooked or underestimated. Critics, on the other hand, saw the incident as emblematic of what they perceived as Trump's tendency to make grandiose promises without proper planning or follow-through. They pointed to the confusion and disappointment that followed his declaration as evidence of a leadership style more focused on spectacle than substance. The incident also sparked a renewed discussion about the complex relationship between Trump and Latino voters. While many political observers had long assumed that Trump's hardline stance on immigration and controversial comments about Mexico would alienate Latino voters en masse, the reality proved more nuanced. The enthusiastic reception at Versailles, particularly among Cuban Americans, highlighted the diversity of opinions within the Latino community and the importance of understanding regional and cultural differences. In the days following the incident, several Latino community leaders came forward to share their perspectives. Some praised Trump for his willingness to engage directly with voters, while others criticized what they saw as a superficial attempt to curry favor without substantive policy commitments. This range of opinions underscored the fact that the Latino vote was far from monolithic and that candidates from both parties would need to develop more nuanced strategies to appeal to this growing demographic. The Versailles incident also reignited debates about the role of social media in shaping political narratives. The rapid spread of information and misinformation about Trump's visit and the subsequent fallout demonstrated the power of platforms like Twitter and Facebook to amplify events and shape public opinion in real time. Media experts pointed out how quickly the narrative had shifted from initial excitement to disappointment and criticism, all within the span of a few hours. This led to discussions about the challenges faced by politicians and public figures in an era of instant communication. Some argued that the pressure to create viral moments and maintain a constant social media presence was leading to hasty decisions and unfulfilled promises. Others saw it as an opportunity for greater transparency and accountability, allowing voters to see their leaders in unscripted moments. The restaurant industry also took note of the Versailles incident, with many establishments discussing how to handle unexpected high-profile visits. Some restaurant owners expressed concern about being caught in the crossfire of political controversies, while others saw potential benefits in the exposure such visits could bring. Industry associations began developing guidelines for handling political events and managing social media responses in crisis situations. In the weeks that followed, Versailles saw a surge in visitors, many of whom were curious to see the site of the now famous incident. The restaurant's management capitalized on this interest by creating a special presidential platter featuring some of Trump's favorite dishes from his visit. This move was met with mixed reactions, with some praising the restaurant's entrepreneurial spirit and others criticizing it as an attempt to profit from controversy. The incident also had ripple effects on Trump's campaign strategy. His team began to place greater emphasis on advance work and logistics for impromptu stops, seeking to avoid similar situations in the future. They also increased their focus on targeted outreach to specific Latino communities, recognizing the potential for support in unexpected quarters. As the initial furor died down, academics and political strategists began to analyze the Versailles incident as a case study in modern political communication. They examined how a single unscripted moment could generate widespread media coverage, energize supporters, alienate critics, and spark broader discussions about policy and leadership. Some saw the incident as a reflection of the increasing merger of politics and entertainment in American public life. They argued that the line between campaign events and reality TV was becoming increasingly blurred, with voters expecting not just policy proposals but also drama and spectacle from their political figures. Others viewed the Versailles visit as an example of the enduring power of retail politics in the digital age. Despite the prevalence of social media and televised debates, they argued, there was still no substitute for face-to-face interactions between candidates and voters. The enthusiasm generated by Trump's surprise visit, they said, demonstrated the continued importance of local engagement and community connections in political campaigns. The incident also prompted discussions about the role of small businesses in political discourse. Versailles, a longtime community institution, found itself thrust into the national spotlight and forced to navigate complex political waters. This led to debates about the responsibilities of business owners in politically charged situations and the potential risks and rewards of engaging with high-profile political figures. In the months that followed, the Trump at Versailles incident became a touchstone in discussions about the 2024 presidential campaign. It was frequently referenced by pundits and strategists as an example of the unpredictable nature of modern politics and the challenges of managing public perceptions in a fast-paced media environment. For Trump himself, the incident seemed to reinforce his belief in the power of unscripted moments and direct voter engagement. Despite the controversy, he continued to make impromptu stops at local businesses during his campaign, though his team became more careful about making specific promises or declarations without proper preparation. The Latino community's response to the incident remained divided. Some saw it as a genuine attempt at outreach, albeit poorly executed, while others viewed it as a cynical ploy for votes. This division highlighted the ongoing challenge for political candidates in crafting messages that resonate across the diverse Latino electorate. As the 2024 election approached, the Versailles incident faded from the headlines, but its impact lingered. It had become a part of political folklore, a cautionary tale about the pitfalls of impromptu politicking and a reminder of the complex dynamics at play in American electoral politics. For Versailles, the incident ultimately proved to be a net positive. The restaurant's handling of the situation and its subsequent community outreach efforts had reinforced its status as a Miami institution. It remained a popular stop for politicians of all stripes, though future visits tended to be more carefully orchestrated. In the end, the Trump at Versailles episode served as a microcosm of the larger political landscape, complex, unpredictable, and rife with both opportunities and pitfalls. It demonstrated the power of a single moment to capture the public imagination and spark broader conversations about leadership, community, and the nature of political engagement in 21st century America. As the years passed, the incident became the stuff of local legend, retold with varying degrees of embellishment by Miami residents and political junkies alike. It served as a reminder of the enduring power of retail politics and the unpredictable nature of campaign trail interactions. More importantly, it highlighted the ongoing importance of understanding and engaging with diverse communities in the ever-evolving landscape of American politics. The legacy of that fateful day at Versailles extended beyond the realm of politics. It became a case study in crisis management for businesses, a cautionary tale for politicians about the dangers of overpromising, and a testament to the resilience of community institutions in the face of unexpected challenges. For the patrons who were present that day, the memory of Trump's visit and the ensuing chaos became a story to be shared with friends and family. A personal brush with history that exemplified the often surreal nature of American political life. As future candidates made their way through Miami, many made a point of stopping at Versailles, aware of its significance both as a community hub and as the site of a memorable political moment. These visits were typically more carefully choreographed, with teams ensuring that any promises made could be kept. The incident also left an indelible mark on the political discourse surrounding Latino voters. It served as a powerful reminder of the diversity within this demographic and the danger of making broad assumptions about voting patterns based on ethnicity alone. Political strategists on both sides of the aisle began to develop more nuanced approaches to engaging with Latino communities, recognizing the importance of understanding local issues and cultural contexts. In academic circles, the Versailles incident became a popular subject for case studies in political science and communications courses. Students analyzed the event from various angles, examining the initial media coverage, the spread of information on social media, the restaurant's crisis management response, and the long-term political implications. For Trump, the Versailles visit became both a cautionary tale and a point of pride. While his team worked to avoid similar logistical missteps in the future, the former president often referenced the enthusiastic reception he received as evidence of his enduring popularity among certain Latino voters. As American politics continued to evolve, the Trump at Versailles incident remained a touchstone, a moment that encapsulated the unpredictable, often chaotic nature of modern campaigning. It stood as a reminder of the power of unscripted moments to shape narratives, the importance of community engagement in politics, and the complex interplay between national figures and local institutions. In the end, what began as a simple campaign stop became a multifaceted story about politics, community, media, and the American experience. It demonstrated how a single moment could ripple outward, touching on issues of identity, representation, and the nature of leadership in a diverse and rapidly changing nation. As future generations of politicians made their way through Miami, many would pause at Versailles, order a Cuban coffee, and reflect on the lessons of that day, a day when a promise of free food led to a whirlwind of controversy, conversation, and ultimately, connection. In doing so, they would be participating in a continuum of American political life, where the personal and the political, the local and the national, continually intersect in ways both predictable and surprising. The Trump at Versailles incident, in all its complexity and contradiction, had become more than just a footnote in a campaign. It had become a part of the American political tapestry, a vivid illustration of the ongoing dialogue between leaders and citizens that forms the backbone of democratic society. In this way, it served as both a lesson from the past and a guidepost for the future, reminding all who would seek public office of the power and responsibility that comes with engaging directly with the people they hope to serve.